The biggest myth about wealth in America is that once you become a millionaire, you're financially free. That might have been true 40 years ago, but today, you're barely in the top 10%. In this video, I'm going to show you what it takes to make it in the top 10%, 5%, and 1% of net worth in 2026. I'm also going to share where I personally stand in that. More importantly, I'm going to show you how to get higher up the wealth ladder based on real data so you eventually get into the top 1% of wealth in the United States. Now, I'm Matt Clark, co-founder of two companies with over $100 million in sales each, Amazing.com and Life Boost Coffee. I've been helping people build businesses since 2012. Those people, we estimate, have generated over $10 billion in sales so far. And I'm here to give you all of my best strategies and lessons learned over the past 16 years for free. First, let's talk about what we're going to cover today. We're going to focus on net worth. The reason is we could also talk about income, but this video would just be longer and I don't think would really add anything because there is an important lesson. I think once you learn this lesson, you'll understand why we focus on net worth because it's really comes from income in most of the cases. So I recently read a book called The Wealth Ladder, and the biggest point that came out of that book for me was that in most cases, net worth is determined by income. Somebody either has to get a job or build a business that generates a lot of cash flow, or they build a company that goes public and they sell stock, which will eventually show up in their income as well through capital gains. And so one quote from that book that I think will bring this point home is he said, "Your income today is the foundation of your wealth tomorrow," which is why investors like Warren Buffett have focused on businesses that actually generate cash flow and don't just keep pushing that off till a later date that may never come. So we're going to focus on net worth, but it very much is related to the income that you generate either through investments or through the businesses that you build. So let's see what wealth looks like at each of these levels. Now, this data is from the Federal Reserve Triennial Survey of Consumer Finances. So let's talk about the top 50% or the 50th percentile. They have around $192,000 net worth. They probably have an okay job. They're trapped in the situation in which income rises more slowly than wealth, and they never really are able to escape that. Bump that up into the top 10%. The net worth is around $1.9 million. Now, they look wealthy on paper. They have almost $2 million. They're multimillionaires, but most of their assets are trapped in the house that they live in and in retirement accounts. These are people who've either been working for a long time at some sort of six-figure job, or maybe they've been working at a job that pays a little bit more, but they've been working a few less years. These people are asset rich, but freedom poor. Now, the top 5%. The average net worth is around $3.8 million. Now, they earn well and invest well, but they're still playing the same game as the top 10%, just with bigger numbers. In most cases, these people are just older. They've been having a longer time working at a job, earning a six-figure income, saving up, putting money in their retirement accounts into their 401k, and now they're in the top 5% with maybe only a few decades left to live. Now the top 1%. The median net worth is $13.6 million. Now, they break away from the pack. As you see, there's a bigger and bigger jump each level of wealth that we go up. They're no longer relying on retirement accounts, jobs, and their home to build their wealth. They're 11 times more likely to own a business than the bottom 50%. This is why a lot of times people talk about how do you get in the top 1%, because this is where you're not just somebody who saved up a bunch of money. You found a way to separate how much you earn and your net worth away from what your job is. Now, just for fun, what does it take to make it in the top 0.1%? About a $50 million net worth. And so what I'd like you to do right now is comment below with which level you'd like to reach. So what's the pattern here? Lower wealth groups, if you look at how their assets are made up, most of their wealth is just in cash, cars, and sort of their primary residence, the house that they live in. The middle wealth groups, a lot of their wealth is in retirement accounts and primary residence. They have a bigger house, a bigger retirement account, but that's still where most of their money comes from. As you get into the higher wealth groups, the top 1%, for example, most of their money is in business interests, either private companies or public companies that they own a significant amount of stock in, probably beyond just their 401k. This is, they've either started a business that has gone public, they've invested heavily in bigger companies, or maybe they invested in somebody else's business that took their company public. Either way, these are more close business interests, either companies they personally own or they own as part of another group. That's the biggest difference. Rather than just having money in houses and cars and retirement accounts, they own business interests that have made them extremely wealthy. I experienced this path myself, from high earner, or what would have been a high earner if I lasted longer, to business owner, and that's what really built my wealth. When I was in college, say around 2007 or so, that's when I was reading about these hedge fund managers that were making, $1 billion in income in a year, not just business appreciation, like actual income in a single year. So I was like, that sounds like a fantastic business to be in. I was going to join an investment bank, work there for, 5 years or so, and then start my own thing in that industry. So I actually went to Citigroup and worked in their energy trading department right out of college. I was making $60,000 a year. I got a $10,000 signing bonus, which is pretty good straight out of college, over a decade ago. But there was just one problem. I was just miserable being an employee. I was just not built for it. I had 2 parents that were entrepreneurs. I was not going to make it, 5 years sort of looking up to these people and doing whatever they say, working in that sort of environment. So I quit to go start my own business. Now, I ended up building an e-commerce business only a few months later. I went from earning $60,000 a year to about $3,000 a month with my first business. Then I had to hire an employee and was basically earning nothing. And at the time, I was kind of, what the hell did I do? Because I knew the friends that I had that were still at the investment bank, another year, they'd be earning $100,000 plus bonuses on top of that. That's the whole reason why you work in that industry. But fortunately, things worked out for me. As I built my businesses, I was able to make my first million by 25 and just kept growing from there. And plus, I had a heck of a lot more freedom. And I used my money that I made from those businesses to invest in public companies, private businesses, kind of like a mini Warren Buffett model. So today, the main sources of my net worth are the cash flow from companies that I've built over the past 16 years or so. And so, for example, our business, amazing.com, we sold $100 million of our amazing selling machine training program alone, outside of everything else we had going on in the business. So sure, we had affiliates. We had to give basically half of that too, because we had a 50% affiliate commission. I had a business partner who we were splitting it with. And then also we had employees and operating costs, et cetera, but still was able to generate a good amount of cash, millions of dollars in cash from that to actually put in my own investment account and let compound over time. And I invested that money into public and private businesses. So that's been a big source. Another one has been building another company from the ground up. I was actually doing about $200,000 a year before I joined, but I partnered up with my friend Charles and I said, hey, if I can scale this thing, which is really my specialty, is scaling businesses really quickly, especially e-commerce businesses. And I was like, if I can help you scale this thing, I want 40%. If we can't, the business is yours. So we made a deal. We blew through all of our numbers. And today, my ownership in that business alone is probably worth somewhere between $25 and $60 million. So that's been another big source of net worth, but also cash flow, especially over the last couple of years. Then I also own just personal stuff, but like, people, as you start getting up higher and higher in the wealth categories, that stuff matters less and less. I have a couple cars, we have a couple houses, but that's less of a factor in this whole picture. So the core message here is to build wealth, increase your income, and use that to gain interest in other businesses, either businesses that you personally own, businesses that you buy, or public companies that you invest in. The more you do that, the more your wealth is going to compound like the top 1%. There's just one problem if you do all this through a job. An investment banker, to get to $1 million in annual salary, takes around 10 to 15 years, and a very small percentage of people actually ever get there. Most quit along the way. To be a doctor that gets to $1 million a year in income takes 15 to 25 years, including schooling. That's why that path was not going to work for me. I was miserable working for somebody else. I knew I had to go out there and build a business, and because as a business owner, it's all up to you. I started a business from nothing, then made a few grand a month, and kind of went from there all the way up to building quite a bit of wealth. And so that's the path that I chose. You may choose to keep working at a job and do that, but in all likelihood, because you're watching this video, you're probably going to want to go out there and build your own business, and that's going to be the real source of wealth for you. And to give you one bonus tip, this may be a source of a whole nother video in the future, is if you build a business that's successful, you don't always want to reinvest all your money in that business. What I found out with my company, amazing.com, at one point we had like $12 million in the bank that was basically free and clear. We ended up taking that money because we thought we had to grow that business, had to reinvest, and took all of that money and hired employees, built a mobile app that cost $500,000 that we didn't do anything with, invested $1 million in a radio show advertising that produced nothing, put another $500,000 in a community platform we threw away, had a team in Ireland, full development team over there, in addition to our 60 plus employees in the US, did all these things. We were just trying to force this thing to grow. Had we taken that $12 million, and the whole business at the time was just teaching people how to sell on Amazon. So if we would have taken that $12 million and just put it in Amazon stock and done nothing, literally sat on a beach for the next decade, today that would be worth about $80 million from doing absolutely nothing. And so the big lesson here is like, sure, if we would have invested Bitcoin a long time ago, there's all these weird appreciation sort of examples we can come up with. But to me, the big lesson is not like, oh man, I'm so sorry I missed that, because we're always going to miss stuff like that. It's that your business may not always be the best place to reinvest. So as your business succeeds, as it makes money, think about, will those incremental dollars be most productive reinvested in your business or reinvested somewhere else? An easy option is to reinvest them in the greatest companies in the world, assuming stock prices are relatively reasonable. There's these businesses out there that are a lot better than all of our companies. That's why they're so big and huge. Google, Amazon, Facebook, Netflix, all of these kind of companies. There's Berkshire Hathaway. So that's always another option, is to just put money into them and let them do all the work for you, manage all the employees, do all the meetings, do all the HR, do all that sort of stuff, create products, market, do finance, all those sort of things. That's always an option. Or you can invest in other smaller businesses or start new businesses. So big tip for you is always be looking at the opportunity cost of investing more money in anywhere, especially your business. Is this the best use of this money, or is there a higher use of this money that can still allow me to keep compounding capital and eventually reach that top 1%. Everyone says money doesn't matter for happiness. I've read all the studies, I've read all the books. Maybe there's some criteria, maybe it's 75 grand, maybe money keeps incrementally making us happier up to multiple millions of dollars. I've heard it all. What I've seen though, very anecdotal, is how much money do you need to feel wealthy? I know a lot of people that have made hundreds of millions of dollars. I know people that don't have any money. I know people that have made millions of dollars. I know all across the board. Based on my experience, talking with a lot of these people, being friends with a lot of these people, is the amount of money that I think it takes for somebody to feel wealthy is around $3 to $5 million. Specifically, $3 to $5 million that's not tied up in a single business. If you own a business that's worth $5 million and that's 100% of your net worth, maybe a couple hundred grand in savings, you're not going to feel that wealthy because you know that that business could crumble at any moment. The valuation is not 100% clear or tangible. So if you have $3 to $5 million that's not tied up into a business, meaning you've sold a business or you've accumulated that, it's invested in index funds or real estate or whatever that's fairly secure and conservative, that's where I believe people feel wealthy because they know that at like 5%, a very conservative interest rate they can earn per year on that, that's $150,000 to $250,000 a year, basically automatically. And so that's pretty much guaranteed. So that means most of your reasonable lifestyle expenses are completely covered and you don't literally have to work anymore. Now, most of the people I know keep working and they keep building, but they feel comfortable. They can do what they want, they can live the life they want, and they don't really have to earn anything else unless they just want to make more money and do bigger things, but they don't have to. So it's at that level, you may set a target to achieve so that you feel that level of comfort and wealth. Now, everyone's all over the place. Some people, they're never going to be happy with how much money they have. Some people are happy at way less, but that gives you a good rule of thumb to shoot for, other than these, top 1%, 5%, and 10% that we've talked about. And really at that point, once you have enough money where you don't have to work, you should start thinking about, what do you want your bigger purpose to be? What is your calling? Don't just make money to make more money. And don't think also that I'm going to make, a few $1,000,000 and then go sit on a beach all day. I've seen both cases. I've done both cases. And either way, you're going to be miserable and unfulfilled. Make enough money to feel comfortable, then think about what good you can do in the world. Now, that might still involve building businesses like me, and you'll be doing it with a different focus and different purpose though. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.